Tyon Grant-Foster is finally able to play for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. How will Mark Few fit the 6'7" wing into the team's plans?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets that you can use all across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. Well, folks, it is number 8 in our player preview series today. We're talking every player on Gonzaga's roster coming into the season. We're talking about their history, how we got here, how they ended up in a Gonzaga uniform. We're talking best and worst case scenario projections for this upcoming season. And then we're closing out the show, taking a look at each player's expected role, expected production, and their future, whether it's at Gonzaga, whether it is going on to play professionally. Today is the big day because we are finally able to talk about the projections for the great Tyon Grant-Foster, who is now eligible. If you missed this conversation, it is Monday's episode. We talked all about the preliminary injunction hearing that took place on Monday afternoon in Spokane County. Grant-Foster being granted eligibility for this upcoming season through that injunction, and then driving over to the McCarthy Athletic Center to play for Gonzaga in their exhibition game on Monday night. So for Grant-Foster, because the situation has been so heavily covered on this show, we're not going to go through his history quite the same way, because we have been talking about Tyon Grant-Foster's college basketball career and the history pretty extensively over the last really couple of months here on Locked On Zags. We are still going to go over some of it here, since most of the conversation hasn't really been about what Grant-Foster has done on the court. It's mostly been about how much he has and has not been on the basketball court over the last 6 years. Grant-Foster is a 6'7" wing from Kansas City. He was unranked out of high school and began his career at the junior college level, playing at Indian Hills Community College in Kansas. He spent 2 years there before becoming one of the best junior college players in the country. He hit the transfer portal, was the number 2 ranked junior college player in that portal class, and ended up at Kansas. Spent 22 games in a Kansas uniform. This was during the 2020-21 COVID season. In those 22 games, Grant-Foster played about 8 minutes a night, about 3 points, and a little over 2 rebounds per game. Fun fact, Tyon Grant-Foster's first ever game at the Division I level was against Gonzaga. It was on November 26th, 2020. It was the season opener for Gonzaga, and the first game also played at the Division I level by Jalen Suggs. A nice reminder of the age gap here, talking about the fact that Grant-Foster and Jalen Suggs both played their first Division I game on the same day. Suggs had a little bit better performance than Grant-Foster did in that one, as Gonzaga rolled to one of many victories they picked up that season. Grant-Foster played just 10 minutes in that game, had 3 points in that one. But kind of a fun fact that he actually began the Division I part of his career playing against the Zags. After that season at Kansas, Tyon Grant-Foster transferred to DePaul. That is where we had the, again, I'm going to continue to quote Mark Few because I love this quote and it's fun to say, especially now that the context is that it worked and Grant-Foster is eligible. But Mark Few said after the Northwest exhibition game, quote, "He literally died twice." And that remains true of Grant-Foster. He, the first time that happened was at halftime of his first game in a DePaul uniform. He's playing for the Blue Demons in the 21-22 season, played 15 first half minutes, looked good, and then collapsed at halftime. Again, literally died effectively in that moment, was taken to the hospital for a cardiac arrest and missed the rest of that season. Ended up suffering another cardiac event, I think like 9 or so months later during a pickup game. And then because of that, had another surgery and missed the entire next season. So he spent 2 academic years at DePaul, 21-22 and 22-23, playing one half of one basketball game. That is it. After that, he reemerged at Grand Canyon and played for the Lopes in the 23-24 season. And it's worth reiterating how out of nowhere this season was. Again, Grant-Foster was a highly regarded player out of the junior college ranks when he went to Kansas, but he didn't do much at Kansas, and we didn't see him at DePaul. DePaul's not a great basketball program, so him landing at DePaul didn't inspire a ton of confidence that he was going to be a great player necessarily. And then he misses 2 years with like a very serious medical issue. So the fact that he crops up at Grand Canyon, a program that, had some success prior to that, but was not he helped put them on the map in a major way the last couple of years. So that season in 23-24, when Grant-Foster went out, averaged 20 points per game, was the WAC Player of the Year. This came out of absolutely nowhere. People were not expecting this at all. And again, Grant-Foster was great. Not only 20 points per game, he also averaged 6 boards. He averaged 1.7 steals and 1.5 blocks in about 33 and a half minutes per game. 50% on his 2-pointers, 33% from 3 on about 4.5 attempts per game, and 74.5% from the free throw line. Folks, that was on over 8 attempts from the line per game. He was a foul merchant while he was with the Lopes. Again, WAC Player of the Year, all-WAC tournament team, nearly willed Grand Canyon to a win. He did will them to a win over St. Mary's in Spokane in the NCAA tournament, and then nearly took them to a win over Alabama in that same tournament. Alabama went all the way to the Final Four that year. Tyon Grant-Foster entered the NBA draft process after that season, but somewhat surprisingly, opted to return to Grand Canyon instead. He could have entered the transfer portal, could have likely gone to a many number of places for the 24-25 season, could have also gone to the NBA. He likely would have been drafted had he stayed in the NBA draft process. But instead, he returns to Grand Canyon, comes back for the 24-25 season. Things do not go as well for Grant-Foster. It's not that he was bad. He still averaged 15 points, 6 rebounds. He still averaged 1.7 steals and 1.5 blocks, which are the same numbers he put up the previous year. And he did it this time in about 5-6 less minutes per game. But the ankle injury cost him some time towards the end of the year, and his efficiency just plummeted. He was not shooting the rock well from 3. His overall field goal percentage dropped below 40%. And it was just kind of a mediocre season for Grant-Foster to finish out his career at Grand Canyon. Then, of course, we know what happens after this. Grant-Foster enters the transfer portal. He commits to Gonzaga in May of 2025, and then the ping pong back and forth between he and the NCAA. Gonzaga submits a waiver June 6th, denied June 24th. Gonzaga submits a reconsideration request July 17th, denied September 12th by the NCAA. Appeal submitted September 25th. Practice waiver granted October 2nd. And then appeal denied October 17th. Grant-Foster files his lawsuit, gets that injunction scheduled for October 23rd. NCAA gets that injunction moved, or really tries to get it canceled by saying it needs to be in a federal court. Federal Judge Thomas Rice says, nope, this is stupid. It should stay in the state court. Grant-Foster's attorneys get it scheduled for Monday, yesterday, or 2 days ago, as you're listening to this, October 27th. That is then after a 2.5-hour session. Judge Poland agrees, gives him the injunction, and he suits up for Gonzaga in that exhibition game. That is what has happened over the last 5 months for Tyon Grant-Foster. And again, we did see him very briefly at Craziness in the Kennel, but he had only been eligible to practice for Gonzaga for, I think, 2 days before he played at Craziness. So he played very little. And Mark Few basically said, yeah, he begged us to play. And so we let him go out there. We let him kind of, play so that he could get in front of the crowd and all that. But, we weren't expecting much from him because he hadn't been around the team. And then he only got to practice for another week and a half or so before his eligibility was denied and taken away from him until Monday, when it is finally reinstated. All that to say, Grant-Foster has spent virtually no time with the Gonzaga Bulldogs. No time learning the system, learning his role, learning the offense, familiarizing himself with his teammates. He has not had very many opportunities to do all of that. And that makes a massive difference in terms of projecting what this upcoming season is going to look like for Grant-Foster. Because of that, the best and worst case scenarios for the 6'7" wing are astronomical in terms of how much they vary based on what could be a really, really great season or what could be a bit of a challenging season through no fault of Grant-Foster's own. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what this season could look like for Grant-Foster in a best case and a worst case scenario coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else as of August 2025. And from footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. And Mazda brings that same intention to how they craft every make and model. You can feel that incredible Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season, because with Mazda, everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And like our players, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. We're still talking Tyon Grant-Foster here, our player preview episode for the 6'7" wing. Now that we are, as I'm recording this, about 24 hours removed from the decision by Judge Poland to give Grant-Foster his preliminary injunction, meaning he is eligible to suit up for the Gonzaga Bulldogs this season. What I want to do now is talk about the best and worst case scenarios for Grant-Foster for this upcoming season. The caveats that we give for all of these are best case within reason and worst case without injury. Those things are a little bit different with Grant-Foster. The best case is within reason, considering the circumstances for Grant-Foster. And I will kind of lay out in the final segment what I kind of project his role would have been had none of this happened. Had he committed in May, been deemed eligible at that time, and been spent the entire summer with the team. But that's not the case. That's not what happened. So we're going to look at what we think Tyon Grant-Foster's best case scenario is, knowing that his situation, knowing what his situation is going into the season. And worst case, we typically do it without injury unless injuries are relevant. Grant-Foster has had injuries. Obviously, he's had significant health issues with his heart. That is a major, major thing that doesn't seemingly go away. He also dealt with an ankle injury last year. I'm not going to get into it any more than to say there is a worst case scenario where Grant-Foster misses time this year. It would be unbelievably tragic. And we all felt this. If you watched the exhibition game on Monday and you watched that play where Tyon Grant-Foster went down because he stepped on somebody's foot and rolled his ankle, all accounts after the game are that he is fine. But in that moment, and Greg Heister and Dan Dickow very correctly noted this on the broadcast, that was the quietest I've ever heard the kennel, because the thought that that could be what ends it for Grant-Foster, that he rolls his ankle and bam, it's all over. 5 months of agony down the drain. It was a horrible feeling. And we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that, considering his past, it is a possibility that injuries or a heart condition or something like that crop up, but we're not going to spend any additional time talking about that in this segment. The best case scenario for Tyon Grant-Foster this season is that he's able to learn on the fly, is that he picks up the role that Gonzaga has identified for him smoothly this season. I think within this best case scenario is Gonzaga finding a way to simplify his role, maybe not having him learn and understand all of the nuances that maybe they would have had he started practicing with the team in June, but instead focusing on, hey, these are the things we want you to get really good at. These are the things we know you can bring to this team, and we're going to start there and have you really hone in on these things. I think the best case scenario for Tyon Grant-Foster still doesn't have him being a major part of Gonzaga's rotation in that game against Oklahoma next Saturday, in that game against Creighton the following Tuesday. But by the time we get to the Players Era Festival, by the time we get to Kentucky in early December, or UCLA the following week, Tyon Grant-Foster is well within the role that he is going to play. He is comfortable, and we are seeing it's not going to be perfect, but we are seeing a player who is very clearly has a strong grasp on what Gonzaga wants him to do, and that is happening by the meat of Gonzaga's non-conference schedule. The best case scenario for Tyon Grant-Foster is that he becomes Gonzaga's go-to bucket getter in the backcourt. This is the role that Gonzaga pursued Tyon Grant-Foster to do. They needed to replace effectively the Khalif Battle on this team, a guard who isn't necessarily on the floor to facilitate, to run the pick and roll, to get the teammates the ball in a position to score, a guard that isn't on the floor to just space the floor the way that Adam Miller is this year, the way that Nolan Hickman was last year, but that Tyon Grant-Foster's role is, we need somebody to score the basketball. This play has broken down. We're putting the rock in your hands. You get to the basket and you get to the free throw line, or you find a way to put that ball in the net. The best case scenario is that Tyon Grant-Foster fills that role. That doesn't force Adam Miller to have to play a role that maybe he's not comfortable with, or that you're not trying to force Steele Venters to be a playmaker when that's not really his game, or that you're putting way more pressure on the bigs to score at a higher clip than you need to because you don't have a go-to bucket getter in the backcourt. The best case scenario is that Grant-Foster fills that role and he's able to do it early in the season. The best case scenario for Tyon Grant-Foster is that he puts serious pressure on the rim this year. Again, he averaged over 8 free throw attempts in his player of the year season. And then even the next year when he wasn't as good, still averaged over 7 free throw attempts per game. I don't think he's going to get to that numbers. Khalif Battle didn't get to those numbers, and that was one of the best skill sets that he had. Grant-Foster has 2 inches on Khalif Battle and is longer and is probably more adept at being able to get to the line. He's not as good at converting at the free throw line. Battle was over 90%. Grant-Foster is more like 75. But in the best case scenario for Grant-Foster is that he is able to get to the line 6-ish times per game, and that he's converting them at a 75% clip, maybe even close to 80% clip, that he is getting 4 or 5 points per game for free at the charity stripe because he's putting the ball on the deck and getting to the rim. The best case scenario for Tyon Grant-Foster is that he is a menace in transition. He was at Grand Canyon. He has been throughout his career. Even in the glimpses that we saw of him in this exhibition game on Monday and at Craziness in the Kennel, we saw that. He had 2 assists at Craziness. Both of them were to Steele Venters for transition threes. He looks ahead with the basketball. He likes to push the pace. There's a reason Gonzaga identified him as a player they wanted in the transfer portal, and part of it is his ability out in transition. The best case scenario for Tyon Grant-Foster is that the gravity of the bigs, Braden, Huff, and Graham Ike, gives him more driving lanes, more open opportunities to get to the rim, and more open looks from 3, and all of that results in the best efficiency of his collegiate career. He's close to 60% on 2-pointers, which he's never been in his career. He's 38% from 3. Heck, let's just say he's 40%, 60 and 40. Those would be well ahead of what he has done in his career up to this point. But again, he was the focal point of Grand Canyon's offense in such a significant way that now playing a role where defenses are not focused on him as exclusively should give him more open opportunities. And in a best case scenario, he is drilling shots left and right at a very high clip. The best case scenario for Tyon Grant-Foster is that his defensive versatility ends up being a monstrous weapon for Gonzaga. He really is Gonzaga's only 2-way wing on this roster. Emmanuel Nicente is here for his defense. He's not a big contributor offensively. Jalen Worley, is not really a wing. He's playing power forward, but he is here for his defense and playmaking to an extent, but he's not much of a scorer. Steele Venters is here for his floor spacing and outside shooting ability, not for what he does defensively. Adam Miller, same thing. Davis Fogel, same thing. I'm not sure what the playing time is going to be for him, but he is much more of a contributor offensively than he is defensively. The only player in this wing group who is consistently good on both ends of the floor is Tyon Grant-Foster. And in a best case scenario, that allows him to play big minutes and be impactful on both sides of the basketball. Again, the number of players that have averaged over 1.5 steals and 1.5 blocks in each of the past 2 seasons in college basketball, I think it's 2. I think it's like 2 or 3 players, and Grant-Foster was one of them. He did that at each of his 2 seasons at Grand Canyon. He is very, very good at blocking shots, at getting steals, at getting out in transition, at being an absolute wrecking ball defensively. And while the WCC is a step up from his competition in the WAC, he is still going to be a matchup problem due to his length, size, physicality, and now significant veteran experience, being one of the oldest players in college basketball. The best case scenario for Tyon Grant-Foster is that he is All-WCC honoree, that he makes the first team, that he is in contention or wins the WCC Newcomer of the Year. There are other great candidates for that award, but Tyon Grant-Foster, from a talent perspective, should be the frontrunner for that award. And if he plays the role that he is capable of playing and adjusts seamlessly to this team, he will end up being the Newcomer of the Year, and it will be a remarkable story. The best case scenario is that this is a story talked about in college basketball for a while. Remember when Tyon Grant-Foster battled the NCAA for 5 months, finally got eligible a week before the season, and then went out and was one of the best scorers in the conference. Helped lead Gonzaga to a Final Four, to a national championship, whatever it may be. Disney comes calling because they want to do something on Tyon Grant-Foster. That is the best case scenario for him. Let's talk about some of the worst case scenarios for Tyon Grant-Foster. Really, it's not that hard to imagine. It's that the long off season, the stress, the turmoil, the ins and outs, being at practice, not being at practice, being able to work with the team, not being able to work with the team, not finding out that he is able to play until a week before the season begins, that it takes its toll, as it very obviously and understandably could, and has to some extent. I mean, he's admitted that, but that it impacts his ability to contribute to this team. The worst case scenario for Tyon Grant-Foster is that it takes him, instead of it only taking a couple of games or a month, that he's not really himself in this system until conference play or until partway into conference play. It kind of looks like Michael Ajayi in the sense that a worst case scenario for Grant-Foster is that we can tell that the talent is there. I think anybody who watched Gonzaga last year could tell that Michael Ajayi was talented, but we could also tell he didn't fit. He was struggling to understand his role. He was struggling to do what Gonzaga wanted him to do, and it resulted in his playing time diminishing as the year went on and ultimately kind of finishing with him really only contributing in garbage time towards the end of the year. That is a possibility amongst the worst case scenarios for Tyon Grant-Foster because he has not spent this time around the team and because Gonzaga's depth on the wing is strong. Early in the season, I expect Steele Venters to play more than Tyon Grant-Foster. I expect Adam Miller and Jalen Worley and potentially Emmanuel Nicente to play more than Tyon Grant-Foster. The worst case scenario for Tyon is that he struggles to chip into those players' playing time because he is not acclimating to the system as quickly as maybe the staff would like him to, or as quickly as he would like to. And again, I think the crappy part about this situation is that it would be understandable. It would be within the kind of realm of possibility, and we wouldn't even be mad at Tyon if he was struggling. Like, I know there was some frustration at Michael Ajayi last year, and I think it was somewhat justified. He also spent a long time in the draft process, which I do not blame him for. But the frustration with Ajayi was like, what is taking so long to kind of get your role under, kind of understand what you need to be doing? With Tyon, if that is an issue that we're seeing, we'll know why. And we'll just continue to feel mad at the NCAA. The worst case scenario is that the anger and frustration that we as fans, that Tyon and that the coaching staff feels at the NCAA right now does not subside over the course of the season because we continue to still see how it is negatively affecting him and this Gonzaga team. There is a scenario where Tyon Grant-Foster is like the 7th or 8th man on this roster, and that he never really plays his way out of that role. That doesn't mean that he will be bad. That doesn't mean that he, it won't have worked or anything like that. It's also possible that 7th or 8th man on this very deep team is still a valuable and productive role. It's just not what he was brought here to be. And the reason he's not reaching the potential and playing the role that we thought he would play is entirely outside of his control. And that is immensely frustrating. The worst case scenario for Tyon Grant-Foster is that he takes a lot of shots, but is just not efficient. Again, his final year at Grand Canyon, he shot 40% from the field on 11.5 field goal attempts per game. He's not going to do that at Gonzaga. He is absolutely not going to take 11.5 field goal attempts per game. It's just not going to happen. He might have a few games where he takes that many, but he is not going to average that or even come close to averaging that. I also would be very surprised if his field goal percentage was below 40%, in part because if he was shooting that poorly, he would just continue to lose playing time. But a reality where he is taking a lot of shots, or where he's struggling to kind of figure out his role, and that ends up with him taking contested twos or, kind of wild shots and missing them a lot, is something that could happen. And for a team that is contending for a national championship, their ability to wait for Grant-Foster to find himself and find that role is just limited, especially with how Davis Vogel has played as of late. With Steele Venters being healthy, with Emmanuel Nicente now being healthy, Gonzaga may not be able to wait around for Tyon Grant-Foster. And in the worst case scenario for him, he doesn't do enough early in the season and falls onto the edge of Gonzaga's rotation and isn't able to carve himself back into a more consistent role. Now I want to talk about what I think is the most likely outcome for Tyon Grant-Foster. Now that he's eligible, we know he's going to play this year. Is he going to start? When is he going to start? How much is he going to play? What is this going to look like? We're going to answer all of that and more coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running or lifting or cross-training with all of your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach your peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. And the personalized class recommendations keep you engaged. You get workouts tailored to your vibe and energy level every single week. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Closing out the show, continuing our Tyon Grant-Foster player preview episode, a show I wasn't sure we were going to get to do this season, but now that Grant-Foster's preliminary injunction has been granted, we know he's going to suit up for Gonzaga, and we talked about what those potential best-case scenarios for Grant-Foster could look like this year, and some of those worst-case scenarios. But now we're going to take a look at what I expect his role to look like, what I expect his production to look like, and we'll talk a little bit about what his future might hold. The first thing I've written in my notes here is what I think his expected role in production would have been had none of this happened. Had he committed to Gonzaga on May 28th, had they submitted the waiver on June 6th, and had the waiver come back approved from the NCAA on June 24th, Grant-Foster arrives on campus for Spokane for the Hoop Fest, which is pretty much when everybody else showed up. That's when Mario showed up. He's with the team for training throughout July and into August, and the sessions that they're able to have. Practices begin in late September. He's there at Craziness. Boom, bang, bing. He is with the team, and there's no mystery. Now, a third of my shows over the last 2 months would have been different, but that's another conversation. Here's where I think Grant-Foster's role would have looked like had all of that happened. He's the starting small forward for this team. He's playing between 28 and 30 minutes per game. He averages 13, 14 points, either second or third on the team in scoring, depending on Graham Ike and Braden Huff's production. 5 or 6 boards like he did at Grand Canyon. I think he's right around that 1.5 steals and blocks per game like he was also at Grand Canyon. He has the best efficiency of his career because, again, he is in a system that has more offensive weapons around him than he did at Grand Canyon. He's on the first team All-WCC team. He wins the Conference Newcomer of the Year. Those are the things that I think would have happened had none of this crap with the NCAA happened. As it stands now, a lot of those things are not super likely to happen. It does not mean that they won't. But I will tell you this. I don't believe Tyon Grant-Foster is Gonzaga's starting small forward. Maybe at some point. But I would be capital S stunned, like stunned beyond belief if Tyon Grant-Foster started for Gonzaga on Monday against Texas Southern. I would be not only stunned, I would be kind of concerned. Like, is somebody hurt? Is there a reason? Like, what are we doing to make this be the case? Not because Grant-Foster's not talented, but why on earth would you start a player who's had like 4 practices with the team? And again, that's not going to happen. It's not going to be a situation that arises. I would not be shocked if Tyon Grant-Foster starts games by January. I'd be a little surprised if it happened in December, but it could. But around conference play, if things go well, if we trend towards the best case scenario, Grant-Foster could enter the starting lineup. Again, I think the key reason here is that he is the player who is most able to contribute to this team positively on both sides of the basketball. Right now, what we've kind of seen from Gonzaga is starting kind of one of the defensive players and one of the offensive players on those wing spots. We saw that in that exhibition game against Western Oregon. They pulled Adam Miller out of the starting lineup and started Emmanuel Inocente in his place. Inocente is a great, great on-ball defensive player. Steel Venters, great three-point shooter. Those two guys don't necessarily contribute on the other side of the ball all that much. Similarly, we could see a starting lineup that includes, like, let's say, Jalen Worley at the 3 potentially, and Adam Miller at the 2, where you then have, or Inocente and Adam Miller starting together, where you have a defensive wing and a three-point shooter on the floor at the same time. But I don't think you start Miller and Venters together, for example, because you lack defense on that lineup. I don't think that you start Worley and Inocente together because you lack offense in that lineup. Grant-Foster can be kind of filtered into any of those lineups because he gives you both. He doesn't give you as much three-point shooting, so I think you probably would err on the side of starting him with one of Miller or Venters, likely Miller, because I just think that Miller is more equipped to play the two and Grant-Foster's more equipped to play the three. But I think that his versatility on both ends of the floor makes him incredibly valuable and means that once he does have an understanding of what is asked of him in this system on both ends of the floor, and he has his feet under him, again, he's been working out. It's not like he's out of shape, but there is still a difference between being in shape and in game shape, and it will take him a little bit of time to get there. But once he's there, it's hard to imagine he's not playing a significant role for this team just because of what he's able to bring on both sides of the basketball. I think we will see Grant-Foster average double figures on very solid efficiency by the time conference plays rolls around. I'm not sure if he'll be starting. I wouldn't be shocked, but I think either way, he's going to be somebody averaging 10, 11 points per game, 50% on his twos, 35+% from three around the time conference play rolls around. The first part of the season, again, it depends. I think early on, he's not playing all that much. He's kind of on the border of being in the rotation. By the time you get to players era, that's when maybe he starts to play a little bit more, gets more opportunities in December, and then conference play, you start to see him more consistently out on the floor. I also think he'll have a few monster games. We saw this with Khalif Battle, where he would kind of be quiet or cold for a while, and then suddenly he would have a 24 points and a half. I think Grant-Foster is going to have some 25-point games this year, where he just takes over, where maybe the team is whoever Gonzaga is playing is really found an efficient way to slow down the bigs, but they're sacrificing defense on the perimeter, and Grant-Foster is just making them pay. Or a game where Gonzaga's defense is so good that they're forcing turnovers, and he is just a wrecking ball in transition, so he's able to score a bunch of points just by getting out and throwing down major dunks. CBS recently released a list of the top 101 players in college basketball this upcoming season. Graham Ike was Gonzaga's top representative at number 20. Braden Huff was at number 78. But most surprisingly was the fact that Grant-Foster was number 70 on this list, which was published on Tuesday. And they said he was the last player they added to the list because they didn't know if he was going to be eligible. It felt to me like somebody adding him onto the list, kind of assuming that he's just going to play the role he would have played had none of this happened, the role that I laid out at the beginning of this segment. They said, Grant-Foster should be Gonzaga's second leading scorer. I will tell you right now, with no disrespect whatsoever to Tyon, I would be shocked if he was Gonzaga's second leading scorer. In part because it's going to be Graham Ike and Braden Huff. Those are the two guys who are going to be the first and second leading scorers. Grant-Foster could end up third. That'd be a great result for him. Certainly it'd be a good result for Gonzaga as well. But the idea that he should just seamlessly step into being the team's second leading scorer when he didn't practice with them pretty much at all this year, that feels like fool's gold. That feels like believing a little bit too much in his ability and really Mark Few's trust and confidence in him to immediately be thrust into a major role right away. Having said that, I think there's a good reality where Grant-Foster is all-WCC second team or all-WCC honorable mention. I think he's in the conversation for newcomer of the year, along with somebody like Adam Miller, along with some of the many other very talented players that have joined this conference this year. Thierry Darlon over at Santa Clara could be in that conversation. Guillermo Diaz-Graham at San Francisco, Jayon Pitt at Pacific. There's many others as well. But I think that Grant-Foster will be in that conversation at the end of the year. In terms of his future, he's not playing college basketball anymore. The NCAA I don't even know what they would do if he attempted to get another year of eligibility, but he's going to be done after this year. He's going to move on. And it's a fascinating story. It's a fascinating career for Tyon Grant-Foster. Junior college player, gets to Kansas, gets an opportunity to go to another school, misses 2 years with the kind of condition that should have ended his career, becomes a mid-major darling and one of the best players in college basketball, comes back and kind of seems to tarnish his reputation a little bit with the bad season, then gets one more shot at it, spends 5 months fighting with the NCAA, and then gets a chance to play for a very good Gonzaga team. This story could have a very storybook ending this season if he's able to have a big year for a very good Gonzaga roster. I am so excited to see how it plays out and just so dang happy that we get to do this show at all, because for a long time it didn't seem like we were going to get to. As for Tyon Grant-Foster's NBA future, he's got the right skills. He's 25 years old. That's going to really hurt him in that conversation. I think had he gone after the 23-24 season, perhaps he would have gotten some more love there. But again, this is a player who's a good defender at 6'7". If the outside shot becomes a more consistent thing, I still think he could get a two-way contract or be somebody who gets in the G League at some point next year, even with his advanced age at this point. But yeah, the odds of him getting drafted have certainly dropped just due to his age and obviously the injury history and medical history for him as well. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Of course, a special shout out to those everyday listeners as well. We'll be back. We got one more player preview for you on Thursday's show. Then we're going to do our bold predictions, our spooky bold predictions for Halloween. And then next week, we're getting right into game previews as Gonzaga gets the season going on Monday night. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.